last week, we were talking about, 2 weeks ago rather, we were talking about faith. So we have our first slide that will remind us of faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. So I was talking about this being the definition of faith. And also, the sermon focused on the crisis of faith we have when we find that there's a gap between what we believe in faith, what we believe God wants for us, and what we see around us. When we see cruelty and loss, humiliation, all these things. So when there's this gap between what we believe, some would even say no, is God's will for humanity and the world, and when what we see falls short of that in the middle is the faith crisis. And of course, this crisis happens from our lives when we're very young. As children, we have this kind of faith crisis when we realize that our parents can disappoint us in terrible ways, that they don't always come through. Or people we love aren't able to live up to our expectations of them. Or when we find out that the world isn't fair, that just when you do the right thing, it doesn't always come out the right way. Or sometimes we learn that cheaters sometimes do prosper. All of these things cause this kind of crisis about, is what I believe true? Really true? Or am I wrong? As we get a little older, we might discover that getting a good education doesn't necessarily get you a great job and a successful life. Or that love doesn't fix everything, like we were told when we were kids. And as last week, as Mike reminded us, love isn't all hearts and flowers, but can be painful, chaotic, disruptive. We may discover that marriage and child-rearing is much, much harder than we ever imagined. As we get older, we face a lot of loss usually, perhaps of parents, of siblings, of spouses, of friends. There's a faith crisis. Life's supposed to be good. And yet, we may face uncertainty about our future. Will our retirement money make it to the end of our lives? Will our health hold up? Will we be able to see, hear, walk, remember? Will we have to struggle with Alzheimer's or dementia and become a burden to someone? Facing uncertainty, discovering painful truths about the world can cause a crisis in faith. So this week what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about how do we keep faith in the midst of these kinds of crises, in the midst of hard times, when we feel disillusioned, when we have encountered something that we think is actually evil, when we have to deal with suffering and death. How do we keep faith? So I was thinking about in times of tragedy, how have we gotten through it? How do we make sense of it? How do we find meaning in it? How do we stay close to God and to one another when all we want to do sometimes is just shut down and sit in a dark room for a while? So as I was thinking about tragedy, I ran across a video about September 11th. It's really wonderful. It's almost 2 hours long. It's called Faith and Doubt, and September 11th. It was done by PBS. And we're going to try streaming two clips from the video. But if it doesn't work, I've got the transcript. So let's watch the first clip. Thank you. So what did you hear in what he said? Is there something there that you could relate to from your own experience of difficulties in life? I think what he's observed is that when we go through these big tragedies, it's that things get real clear. And I've said this, I think, a couple times before, that when we come up with the big questions in life, it becomes very clear to us about what is really important, where we should spend our time and effort. Life is short, and we really know, that there may not be time for another chance. And so he said people who survived 9/11 wanted to get their act together and mended some relationships that needed fixing. Got their priorities straight, not live such a materialistic life, but focus on more spiritual things. We spend so much time chasing success or worrying about getting the newest electronic whatever, that we forget. We get distracted from what is really important. But he also talks, I think, about what I would call the woundedness that comes when we face tragedy. And I think it is a wound. He doesn't say that word, but as I listen to him, that's what I hear. When we come into these deep encounters with life, we can find out that life is a lot harder than we thought. It's crueler, he said. And it makes him be more cynical. He doesn't say about what, but perhaps cynical about people, cynical about God, cynical about his faith. And then he talks about a sense of aloneness, even though he is more blessed than most people, surrounded by children and family that love him. I think that statement is a wound. I don't think it's the truth. I don't think that we are truly alone. I think he feels that way because he is wounded. I believe that we are completely interconnected. All this stuff with physics and understanding how we're all made of atoms and we're all part of the same reality. We are connected to one another, to all of creation on a deep level. But when we're wounded, we can't see it, we can't feel it, and we get stuck in the biggest lie that human beings can tell themselves. And that lie is that we're alone. Because we aren't. We're connected to one another and God, physically, spiritually, emotionally. So I think when he says that, we are hearing his wound talking. He has lost connection with his true self. That true self knows he's connected. He also talks about being shell-shocked. It's the old word for PTSD, the kind of experience when you've gone through something so terrible. Either it's really intensely terrible or it goes on for a long time. And so you find yourself walking through life just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. That you find yourself back in that terrible experience. The smallest things can trigger it. So if you've gone through a series of difficult events or gone through something that was really awful, you walk around not believing that the world can be any different. And that, sure enough, another pile of something is going to land on you any minute. He also talks about just surviving. That's all he has the energy to do. Again, when you've been roughed over by life, you can't do much else except go through the motions. What's the point? Get into this apathetic place, sometimes depression. And that makes us unwilling also to be vulnerable, to try again, to believe that something could be different. So we get stuck because of these wounds. And I would talk about these wounds as we are not able to trust anymore. To trust others, to trust God, to trust ourselves, to trust that the universe is all about love. And this is a loss of faith, this wound. Our faith teaches us that God's will is love, healing, freedom, compassion, joy, all those wonderful things. But when our eyes see something like this, it's really hard to believe that God's will is still there. Another way of talking about this loss of faith is doubt. The word doubt. We bring ourselves, when we go through these difficult things, to question the most fundamental things that we have believed all our lives. Maybe I can't trust God or what I believed about God or who I even experienced God to be. But there's another funny thing about doubt. Doubt is the process, or part of the process, through which faith grows. It's not doubt is the opposite of faith and is busy there canceling it out. Doubt is the thing we go through to get to a deeper faith. It's kind of odd, I know. There's a wonderful passage in the Gospel of Mark, Mark 9, where a man comes to first the disciples and then to Jesus and asks Jesus to heal his son. His son has been suffering from these terrible seizures, almost never-ending seizures, since he was a child, and he can't speak, and he's really in bad shape, and he starts having a convulsion right in front of everybody, and everybody's all worried. And Jesus says to the man, everything is possible if you believe. And the man says something I think is very profound. He says, I believe. Help my unbelief. So both things are happening at the same time. He does believe, he has faith, but there's still a little part, or maybe a big part, that he can't quite yet believe. And that's how our faith grows. I don't know what's in your bag of faith. Maybe it's flunked algebra, got through that. Maybe it's lost my first job, got through that. Maybe it's got through the death of one of my parents. So we have this bag in which is kind of our faith. Experiences that we've made it through, that we've understood that God was with us, the family was with us, the friends, somebody stood with us during that time. So we've got this bag that we're pretty comfortable with. So if we lose another job, say, we'll be able to face it. We'll get through that pretty easily. But then comes along something else. Maybe we go for a checkup and get a scary diagnosis. Or we don't have anything in our bag to cover that. So we have some doubt. Well, I've been through this, and this, but I don't know about this new thing. So going through these difficult experiences helps us put more things in our faith bag. Helps us get deeper, broader. I don't know. Faith isn't something you can measure very well. But these periods of doubt and getting through them is what helps us get through the next thing. Doubt is part of faith. So we shouldn't be afraid of it. But it can cripple us too. We can get stuck there. And for me, getting stuck there is when we stop talking to God. We stop praying. We just get so overwhelmed by the pain. Now, it's going to take a while. When you go through something, you're going to go through the numbness. You're going to go through the quiet, don't bother me phase. But don't get stuck there. As soon as you're ready, keep talking to God. Talk to other people. Don't stop coming to worship. Don't stop being around people who have some faith. Don't stop being around people who have something to offer you, who can maybe give you a little of their faith. Don't cut yourself off from God or from others, even though, man, that's going to be the biggest temptation, isn't it? When you're hurting, you don't want people to see you cry. But if you've ever let someone see you cry, and they give you that hug and you feel that connection, you understand it's worth it. Don't cut ourselves off. Don't shut the door to healing because of doubt. Now, it isn't easy. I'm not saying it's easy when you're in this difficult place. Because by reaching out to others or letting others reach out to you, is there anything I can do for you? Oh, no, I'm okay. Is there anything I can do for you? Well, I don't have energy to cook. Could we go out to dinner sometime? When others reach out to you, let them in. That will begin the healing process. But it's hard to do. No one feels like doing it. We feel hurt, disappointed, and as the young man said, burned. religion itself. Religion set us up for this. It taught us to expect good things. It's hard to be vulnerable, but that's the only way we get to the next part of faith. Faith is built on the risk of being vulnerable, of taking a chance, of making an action. You know, there's that phrase, fake it till you make it. Sometimes you know that there's something that would be good for you to do, but you don't feel like doing it, and then you say, okay, I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to fake that I have the feeling for it. And then as you do it, and you feel better, and it makes things better, you fake it until you make it. Well, faith can be a little bit like that. Act like we have faith. And sure enough, it shows up. And Scripture also, as the scriptures that I chose this morning, as well as other places, emphasizes this interrelatedness between faith and action. And that's also the theme of the Bible studies we're doing this month. 1 Corinthians, if I have the faith that can move mountains, but I don't have love, it's not worth anything. Faith and love, faith and action, faith and doing something are connected. Faith is not a state of mind, a bunch of things I believe, but faith is about willing to be involved with others, with God. Take an action, do something. Expressions of faith can be trust, love, compassion, picketing, demonstrating. All of those can be expressions of faith. The gospel, or rather the book of James, the letter of James, tells us that faith without works is dead, or faith without deeds in the more modern translation. Sounds a little judgmental to me. Like, you know, if your words don't live up to if your actions don't live up to your words, then you're a hypocrite. Sounds like James is trying to get on our case about living faith in action. Well, there's probably a place and a time when we need to examine that question. But today, another way to look at what he's saying is, again, faith is not believing something or just believing something. It's about living in a way that shows or expresses or tries, reaches for faith. We have my picture. Faith involves you, God, and others. You all know, I don't have to remind you, that when you're having a hard time, you feel better if you help someone else, right? Gets your mind off your own stuff. And people often say, well, you know, when I helped other people, I realized that my life could be a lot worse because other people have a much more difficult situation. Well, that's one way to look at it, and I suppose that does make some people feel better. But I think actually the point is to experience your capacity, your potential for love and goodness and justice and all those things. That's what's making you feel better. You all know that combination of faith and action works. But sometimes we do find it tempting to sit at home, don't we? Faith involves you, God, and others when you ask for help. And I know, you know, being raised in a community very like this, no one ever wants to ask for help. It's so hard. You know, you don't want to be a burden on anybody. It's really tough. But actually, when you ask for help, you are giving someone else the opportunity to be loving and compassionate. Just like you enjoy being loving and compassionate, others enjoy it. And when you allow people to help you, you are giving them that opportunity. It's something you see in Asia a lot. It's not unusual for young people or monks in training to beg for food, and you see them in places, you know, they've got their begging bowl and everybody puts something in. Nobody sees this as a burden on society. They see these people begging for food as a blessing. A blessing because it gives you the opportunity to give something. So as we get older and have trouble with hearing, seeing, walking, all the stuff that comes up, ask for help or accept help. Because that's really what binds us together, which reminds us that we are united in God. Because the day I help you, next day you might need to help me. We are here to give each other opportunities to love. The web is bigger than just two people. But when we help each other, we create this community of understanding. We're going to try and play the next video clip, and it's about a very difficult subject. It's at the end of this video. Again, this video is really profound. There's many things in it that I thought were worth sharing. The last part of the video is what we're going to watch, and it focuses on the photos, the experience, the images of people jumping off the tower when things got really bad and they were on a higher floor and there was fire behind them and they realized there was no other choice except to die by fire or to die jumping off of the building. I don't know how many people did, but several people, when they jumped, held hands with someone. Maybe it was a stranger. Maybe it was a coworker that they didn't know. Maybe it was someone they knew well. But in that last moment, their instinct was to hold someone's hand. It's the choice we all have when we go through hard times. Do we put our faith, our trust in hopelessness? Or in that God's love and power is stronger than any evil that's out there? It's a choice. And as these folks have reflected when they see people holding hands in the face of death, that's the revelation that deep within each of us is this understanding of connectedness, that we belong together. The speaker talks about an affirmation of greatness within our humanity itself that somehow shines in the midst of that darkness and contains the possibility of a power greater than death itself. I wouldn't say that it expresses a greatness within humanity. For me, it is the presence of God within humanity that we are seeing. That God is within us and around us at these times. When we reach out for that connection, we find each other and we find God. When we connect, we experience God on a deeper level. We understand more fully what love is. To me, that's the mystery of faith. It is a gift from God, first and last and always. But it is something that is around us all the time. Even in our darkest moments, it's there. And sometimes it takes someone taking us by the hand to feel it. I hope that in your times of darkness, you will reach out, let others reach out to you, and experience the God that is both within you, around you, and in others. Amen.